Coming up, I'll tell you why Day'Ron Sharpe's improvement has secured him a long-term NBA role and whether he has starter potential moving forward.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets. I'm Erik, Slater, Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And on today's show, I'm going to be outlining why I feel Day'Ron Sharpe has secured himself a long-term rotation role in the NBA and whether he has room to grow into a starting caliber player with the Nets. Joining me now on the podcast, we got Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily, and we are running on through a series about the Nets rotation pieces from last year who are returning. And Lucas, today we are going to be focusing on one Day'Ron Sharpe, a player who had a really encouraging season last year, and I think flashed a lot of really intriguing tools, made a lot of really encouraging improvements, and we'll dive into all of it. But when I look at what Day'Ron did last season, I look at his tape, the areas that he needs to improve in and the areas that he did improve in, I came away very encouraged with the fact that he's going to have a role in the NBA long-term, whether with the Nets or with another team. When you look at him, how do you feel about his potential to be a rotation piece, solidified in the NBA for an extended period here?
Yeah, I think that last year proved that there's no need to worry if you're Day'Ron Sharpe's agent or family or whatever about getting him an NBA job for years to come, barring some unforeseen twist, knock on wood, injury-related stuff and all that. He's just got better at everything really he needed to improve at. I would say the one thing limiting his, ceiling, the thing that prevents him from being as impactful as he could be every night is that he's still a below average finisher for that archetype, for that position at the rim, converting layups, dunks, all that. But man, do you remember how bad he was on defense in the first year or two?
Yes, I do.
Did you think he would get to that by the end of his rookie contract?
I did not. Crazy. I did not. And let's dig into it. So it sounds like both of us are obviously encouraged about him having a long-term role in the NBA and hopefully with the Nets. We'll dig into what that role and what the ceiling could look like ultimately. But he made improvements in several areas last year. He continued to be one of the most dominant rebounders in the NBA, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He had the second highest offensive rebounding percentage among players to play over 600 minutes. But the defensive improvement was what really stood out to me because, as you just alluded to, it was rough on that end of the floor for extended stretches during the first few years of his NBA career. And then he comes in last year. He posted a negative 6.7 defensive rating swing. That was the sixth best mark among NBA centers, all NBA centers to play over 600 minutes. And it was an improvement that I didn't really foresee in terms of just his mobility, his range, his ability to be a guy who's hedging out aggressively and then recovering to rollers, to play and drop a little bit more, to even switch sometimes. It's just the mobility, the activity, all of that. I didn't really see that coming along the way that it did for him last season. So how surprising was it for you that he was able to make that kind of improvement with the scheme versatility and things that he was able to do?
Well, the crazy thing is that he already made a really major leap the year before. We were sitting at Media Day in 2023 in October, and Jacques Vaughn pretty much said, yeah, we need to get better at rebounding, and I'm going to, play Day'Ron a little bit. And that was not something that was a guarantee at the time. Day'Ron going into a third year, right? He was not guaranteed to get rotation minutes. That was kind of the level of prospect we were talking about, where it was, okay, going into his last 2 years, the back half of his rookie contract, he needs to actually show some things. And he showed that there was something in that third year. And then this past year, not only was he surviving on the court, but the Nets were way better in his minutes. A lot of that is because of there's a lot of factors there, but his ability to apply defensive pressure, I give Jordy a lot of credit for finding the right way to deploy him. And really a lot of these guys, he has gotten so mobile and so agile, just working on his body in a level that I didn't expect. Like, you know, the whole thing was, well, he's way too slow-footed to play anything but drop coverage. And his technique and positioning and drop is really bad his first 2 years. So it's like, well, what's he going to do on defense? But this year, you know, not only has all that gotten better and he's walling up at the rim and stuff like that, but can switch on the guards. He's like moving his feet on the perimeter. He has really active hands. We kind of knew that. He's really hand-eye coordinated. And like his best plays, like hedging or trapping a screen 30 feet out. And then, as you said, sprinting back to the paint and just being a force and like making things happen. That is really the leap that he made this year while maintaining the strength to just kill people on the glass. He's one of the greatest offensive rebounders the league has ever seen at this rate. I posted that stat in February. He's averaging the highest. He doesn't qualify, but he would be averaging, if he did, for career leaderboard totals, highest offensive rebounds per 100 in NBA history. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So this and now the NBA, you know, we're really valuing that, the value of the possession, this and that, you know, and not only that, he plays in a defensive scheme that creates turnovers. So he's winning you the possession battle. Just really impressive season.
Yeah, and we'll dig more into the offensive rebounding and, you know, how much of a premium teams are going to be placing on that. Right. But let's talk about the defense a little bit more now and just the overall impact. Like you just talked about the offensive rebound, how much he improved on defense. If you look at the net rating swing last season, Day'Ron was a plus 13.3, which for those of you who don't know, that means that the Nets were winning. They were outscoring opponents by 13.3 points per 100 possessions during his minutes. That ranked in the 98th percentile among NBA big men. And obviously, you know, as Lucas alluded to before, there's, you know, you're playing against bench and second units and like the on-off stats and the net rating swing that obviously, you know, plays into that. But when it's that high, like he was playing good basketball. He was having measurable impact on the Nets winning.
And the thing is, you can really directly attribute a lot of it to him. Just to be clear, the 13.3 is the swing, I think. Yeah. So, they were 13.3 points better, but like, you know, per cleaning the glass, right? Pretty much half of that came on offense. Their offense was 6.6 per 100 better with Day'Ron. They shot worse. They turned it over more. They got to the line less. And yet, their offensive rebounding rate was through the roof higher, which carried all of that other stuff if you're just looking at the four factors. And, you know, then on defense, right? They allowed fewer makes at the rim. He got a little bit of the 3-point swing as well, but he also prevented. I mean, when the Nets were on the court, they did a better job. When he was on the court, the Nets did a better job of preventing offensive rebounds and even fouling less, which is something I never thought I would say with Day'Ron on the court. So these reasons that they're better in his minutes, it's not just all, well, you know, they put in this guard off the bench and he was cooking and they got lucky on threes. Like this stuff is directly attributable to his improvements. As for, you know, specifically the defense, it's a little bit less clear because it's not as drastic of a rebounding swing. But I really do just think like there's a value in having scheme versatility. Like you don't have to play him in this coverage because he won't survive anywhere else. And like if he's on an island with a perimeter player, he's going to get killed and this and that. Like his ability to at least be serviceable, doing a lot of different things is just allows him to fit with a lot of different types of guys and have an impact kind of no matter what. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's interesting to say that about Day'Ron because that's not something that we said about Day'Ron earlier in his career. I mean, you look at like that 2022-23 season where Nic Claxton was breaking out as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. He was switching, and then we're playing an extremely switch-heavy scheme, and then it was like Day'Ron got into the game, and it was like we can't really switch him out. He looks a little bit like a fish out of water in drop coverage, and it was kind of like in a limbo of like where is he going to make an impact? And then he comes out this year and it just looks completely different. And as you said, like, I think you have to attribute that to increased mobility and him being able to cover more ground and looking more fluid. Like I've spoken to people around Day'Ron and they've alluded to trainer that he's worked with, who's really worked on, his hips, his mobility, being able to sink down deeper into a stance, being able to be more laterally agile. They gave that guy a lot of credit. I'll get his name later and put it out there, but they attributed to that. But then it's interesting because we talked to Day'Ron at the end of the season during his exit interview, and he was like, I think I need to get my weight under control, and I think I need to drop 10 to 15 pounds. And I'm like, I feel like you just had the best defensive season of your career, and you looked a lot better moving out there. So when you look at the defensive improvement, what's the number one thing that stood out to you? And then after that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll get deeper into some of the things that he did well.
It's really multifaceted because not only has he clearly worked hard on his body, and he was dealing with, what injury did he have this year? He was dealing with
he had a knee, didn't he?
He had a knee, and I think
right
yeah.
Knee, I think.
And so I think he said that having that midseason, right, had made it harder to get in shape and was all that. Mm-hmm. But generally over the last 2 years, he's done incredible work on his body, but he's also done incredible work on his technique, like around the rim, his foul rate. As he couldn't stay on the court because, his positioning was poor, or he was late in rotation, or he had his hands in the cookie jar and he was fouling a lot. So, a lot of guys improve their bodies as they get into the NBA. But for him to be able to do that while improving these really glaring flaws in his defensive profile, like all of a sudden he has not only the mobility, but the technique to play between two guys, to step up to, a driving guard, but get his hand on a pass to the big man, behind him, to the roller. And he's allowing himself to play to his strengths, is what I saw this season. He's allowing himself to be, he really understands the game. We've seen it with his passing, in flashes here and there, and his quick hands. He's allowing like his court mapping ability and his hands to play because he's improved his technique in a variety of coverages. Like, if you talk about at the level, he's not meeting guys with the arm, he's really sliding his feet and not fouling them. Same thing, in the paint. And so I would just say, for as much as his body, as much as his physical development, should be applauded, because that's like not easy and it's evident how hard he worked. For me, the thing that is also equally as impressive is just his commitment to defensive technique in a variety of spots on the floor. And that's what really stood out to me. Not only is this guy a better NBA athlete now, but he knows how to get what he needs to done, if that makes sense.
And Day'Ron has some strengths on the other side of the floor that are contributing to his floor, but also could limit his ceiling. What are those? Where can he look to improve? And does he have the potential to grow into more in an NBA rotation? We'll hit on all that after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Guys, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Guys, Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've ever put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Guys, you ever think you were saving a certain amount and then realize you're coming up well short? Monarch can identify why. It helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. It can help you maximize investments, increase your savings rate, and easily review finances with your partner and or financial advisor. It can help you keep a clear view of your financial health week to week and long-term. Guys, don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about Day'Ron Sharpe, his ability to be a long-term rotation piece, and is there potential for more? And just touching on, last thing on Day'Ron's strengths and what we saw from him last season and why we both think that he's going to have a role in the NBA long-term. We talked about the offensive rebound, offensive rebounding, you said, one of the best the league's ever seen if he was to qualify for the minutes last year, was second highest in the NBA among players to play over 600 minutes. I think Steven Adams was the only player who was higher. And you alluded to the possession battle and the way that basketball is being played now, the pace, all of those things, how important it is to win that. Do you think that offensive rebounding and him having that as a concrete skill is going to lend itself to a higher floor long-term, just the way, with strategy and how the game is trending?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good way to look at it. Like, it just makes his floor as an offensive player high because, no matter what, he's going to get you extra possessions. And his motor is incredibly high. Even when he wasn't at his physical best in his first couple years, you could tell he never gave up on a play. Sometimes there just wasn't enough gas in the tank to get it done, but he always had, he was always slamming the pedal. And that'll keep him on the floor for sure because it's, a possession game. And there really is no explanation as to why he's such a great. I mean, there is an explanation.
I was going to ask you. That was the next thing I was going to ask you is why is he such a good offensive rebounder? And we know that he's a beast physically. Like, he's not the tallest guy, but he's a very bruising force down there. But he just seems to have an innate ability to read where the ball is going and get himself positioned, in the right area.
Yeah, he does all the stuff that great offensive rebounders do. He does his work early. Like, if he's on the weak side, he kind of sneaks behind the box, underneath the rim, and then pushes out. All those little tricks. And then you have to be good at reading where the ball is going to fall off. But you played football. The guy I think he eats contact. I think he just loves to bang, He does. I think he just loves it.
If you watch him, as you said, this is something from my days playing football that, my dad and a lot of other coaches told me was you want to be the hammer and not be the nail, obviously. And you want to be the person delivering impact. And if you look at Day'Ron, he's consistently doing that. He's consistently on the boards before the defender or, offensive player, whatever side of the floor you want to talk about, before they are ready to look at him and start initiating contact. He's already into that motion and he's already delivering the blow and he's getting a lot of these guys off their base and off balance. And obviously a lot of that has to do with his motor. It has to do with, his understanding of positioning. And it has to do with the fact that he's just an extremely compact, strong dude with maybe a little bit of a lower center of gravity relative to some other centers, which I think helps him out. But yeah, I think that's a really big thing for him. And it has been, it's been a strength of his since he came into the league and it's really been able to shine. But if we're talking about Day'Ron's ability to be a starting level center, I think that's a conversation that started to creep into the back of Nets fans' minds midway through last season. Nic Claxton's having a down year. He's a little bit older, a little bit, battling injuries, and Day'Ron's playing so well. The question started to arise of, could this be a player who could challenge Nic Claxton for starter minutes? And is he a guy who could fill that role long term? Where are you at with that when you look back at what he did last season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already at the point where it should at least, if you're trying to win a game as best you can, it should at least be a hot hand sort of thing, right? He's at the level where if he's playing well in a game, it's not crazy to think, you ride him out for the rest of the game. Whereas, 2 years ago, right? He's in his sophomore year. Let's say he's having a good stretch. You're still not going to not put Nic Claxton back in the game.
Yeah.
I think we're at least at that point for sure. And I would be really interested to see him get starter minutes because in this offense, one of his advantages over Nick, aside from offensive rebounding, which is an advantage he has over anybody he could be competing with for minutes, is he seems to be a much better screener and understanding dribble handoff angles. And when you're constantly involved in the action, like you will be in this Nets offense, where they were right at the top of the league in pick and roll and dribble handoff frequency, and he makes contact on screens. He seems to be a little bit more natural, understanding angles, a little bit of a quicker processor, when he catches it in the short roll. I wonder how much all of that could play up in the right system versus just not being a great finisher. That's really what he's battling.
And that's the question, the next one that I was going to ask you, because we have seen some really encouraging flashes of the passing, of being a DHO hub, of being a short roll guy from Day'Ron. And I also think that the width of him, obviously, like his like girth is just much different than Nic Claxton. Like he just has a much different type of frame. And, you know, Nick's obviously a much more narrow dude, and that like makes it a lot more difficult as a screener. Like we're just seeing Day'Ron when he screens take up a lot more space. And as you said, in this system, the way that Jordy wants to play, creating those advantages is just, you know, extremely important. And then obviously being able to capitalize on them. But the finishing is not good. Like it hasn't been good really at any point in his career. He's, you know, around like I think like 60% at the rim.
Low 60s.
Yeah, floating around there for his career, which is not good. Like that's for NBA big men, like that's ranking towards the bottom of the league. And I wonder how much that's going to limit him. So, you know, and it's not just even the finishing at the rim. Like if you look at that outside of that offensively from a scoring perspective, I feel like there hasn't really been much that Day'Ron's bringing to the table, whether you talk about like an in-between game, obviously tried to, you know, develop the three-point shot. I'm not sure if that's ever going to get to a level where it's NBA respectable. When you're looking at whether you think that he could be, you know, like a league average starting center, how much does that stuff give you pause? And do you think it's something that's going to, like, you know, restrict him from reaching that level?
It'll definitely restrict him. I mean, the other thing is that he's also high, like mid-30s in his career on what Basketball Reference and like Cleaning the Glass would call the short mid-range stuff. So like hook range, like 4 to 10 feet. So, you know, those, he doesn't really have the floater or the
that little push shot, the push shot like that. Like you see Isaiah Hartenstein's the guy that's always popped into my head. Like he just made a living off of that shot nowadays. And like Day'Ron, he's not the biggest guy. Like he's not the same caliber of lob threat, I think, as some of these other guys. And he doesn't really have that in-between game either. So I think that that's just limiting his offensive game. And that's what gives me pause as to whether he's ever going to be, you know, an average or better starting center in the league. I'm just not sure that those things will allow him to get there.
Yeah. Like it is great that he has it seems a pretty, and again, I legitimately would like to see more minutes in it with, you know, his understanding of how to create advantages at the point of attack with the screening and the dribble handoff and, oh, you're overplaying, I'll hit the back door. He's really good at that. But at some point you do need to be a vertical spacer. If you're rolling downhill, you need to be a guy you're worried about on the lob behind you. And again, he's gotten better at that. He's worked on his body. But Hartenstein is like a good, maybe career comp. Like, oh, you know, this backup is like winning a lot of his minutes and he has all these kind of skills, but now like we're going to put him in a starting role and, oh man, he's worth $90 million. And he has the push shot. And I'm not saying it's a apples to apples, a 1-on-1 comp, but I don't know. I would say that there will probably, I mean, if this keeps continuing at a normal rate, you know, there will be a team that's willing to hand him starting minutes just because the, you know, way you could see him like functioning in an offense is really valuable to the other players for all this other stuff we just mentioned. But also like he's going to need to be near the rim a lot to capitalize on the offensive rebounding stuff. So that really is the challenge. And like, I don't think I see him getting a lot better at finishing inside. Like maybe a go-to move here and there, like, you know, a hook shot against smaller guys or a pet move to up it a little. But I don't know. It just, I would have to think about more as to why I don't believe it, but I don't really believe there's a big finishing leap incoming. Do you?
I don't. And, you know, it's just like, I think touch is something that, you know, some players have or some players just don't have. And for Day'Ron, like I've never really seen that to be a strength of his game. And yeah, like I'm just not sure how much you're able to just develop that. Obviously, you can keep working on it. You can try to improve, but I'm not sure that it's ever going to reach that level. And ultimately, like you said, you could see a team, if he improves in these other areas or just gets a little bit better at the offensive finishing and stuff, giving him starter minutes. Like, I don't doubt that. Like, I think that's definitely in the cards. But is he a guy that like can be a starting center in a playoff level rotation? I'm not sure that these deficiencies are ever going to let him get there, which isn't a slight to him because he's going to have an NBA role, you know, for years to come, which is hard enough to do in itself. You know, he was a late first-round pick, and he's had a successful career thus far, just got a 2-year, $12 million contract, kind of the same bridge deal that Nic Claxton did, and we'll see if he can turn it into more. But his standing and what he's doing is obviously going to have an impact on Nic Claxton's situation, or at least in the fans' mind, it should. So what is that impact? How do those two guys potentially fit together? We'll talk about that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you all for helping us out. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about Day'Ron Sharpe. And we just outlined why we think Day'Ron is going to have a role in the NBA for years to come. Might not be a starter role, on a playoff level team, but he's a guy last year, like the drum was beating for him, kind of coming for Nic Claxton, it seemed like. And now we're at a position where Nic Claxton has the extension. He's got 3 more years left on his deal. Day'Ron just got an extension. That's this year, and I would assume the Nets pick up his $6 million team option for the following year. But there's a lot of questions about Nic Claxton's future, obviously. Like, this is a rebuilding team. Day'Ron's younger. They just invested in a lot of rookie dudes and, just reset the timeline somewhat. So when you look at Day'Ron and how he's developing, in your mind, should that have any impact on how the Nets are handling Nic Claxton, from a roster management standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, if you're trying to tank and maximize this draft pick, you're only first rounder this upcoming year. You don't really want Day'Ron coming off the bench just to maul other teams' backups, because you kind of already know he can do that. And, the Nets were that February stretch. It was against bad teams and they were kind of shooting like, 10% from 3. But also, Nic Claxton, when he was like playing well for some of those games, you had 48 minutes of pretty solid center play, like in the middle. And that will help you win games if you can do that. So just from that perspective, it kind of has to, right? And then, the fan angle is funny because Day'Ron does a lot of things that are just loud and things that fans will fixate on. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but clearly giving probably more effort on a night to night, on a possession to possession basis. And you notice the rebounds, and you notice when you give up an offensive rebound, and that really sticks in the mind. And over time, it's become this thing of there's a lot of factors here, like the bench lineups and opponent 3-point shooting percentage and this and that. But at some point, he's winning his minutes and Nick isn't. And I think I have gotten to the point where it's at least people have told me big man play in the NBA can be so fickle, because you're reliant on your creators, your offensive creators a lot of the time, and you're covering up leaks on the defensive end. So your impact is really tied to those around you. So, you can go up and down and this and that. And so I was really resistant to it at first. And as the sample size grows larger and these trends keep happening, I think it should. I'm not saying they got to ship Nick out of town tomorrow, but it's not nothing, I think, is where I'm at.
No, and I agree with you completely. And I think we did an episode on Nic Claxton last week or the week before that. I don't remember. If you guys haven't, go check that out. And we both talked about, the areas that Nick needs to improve and needs to regain that explosiveness in the motor that made him such a special player. But I think, the jury, I think, is still out on what level of player Nic Claxton is and whether he can make that leap. And if ultimately he can't, I don't think that him and Day'Ron are in such a dissimilar, tier of players where you need to be prioritizing one or the other, or you need to be keeping Nick around at the expense of potentially a tank or what you can get for him in a trade. So I definitely agree with you there. I just think that it's going to be an interesting conversation. And then, props to Day'Ron, because Day'Ron asked about it at numerous, points, and he said consistently, only had great things to say about Nick, has said, even with his improvement, I don't care if I'm starting. I don't care if I'm coming off the bench. I just want to get my minutes and I'll do what I can. That's what he said at his exit interview. And honestly, Day'Ron just seems like just a good dude to have around. You and I have both been in the locker room, and he's just a really positive, jovial guy. He's always laughing. He's always smiling. And while that stuff maybe doesn't always show up on the court, I do think that it has a value to a locker room, especially when you have 5 rookie first-round picks coming in.
Yeah, I mean, everyone likes Day'Ron, and I think based on everything that we've said so far, there can be absolutely no doubt about his work ethic. There can be no doubt about how he comports himself as a pro. I've never heard anything refuting that, but I don't even need to because I've seen the improvements, and you don't fall into that overnight. And he's, maintained this relationship with Nic Claxton, as their obviously minutes are inversely aligned, however you want to say it. And that speaks to his character. And last 2 years, Claxton's played nearly 4,000 minutes because he wasn't super hurt in 2024. They have a 118 defensive rating with him on the court. They're -9 per 100 possessions. Day'Ron, because of injuries, and being a backup, has only played 1,800 minutes. They have a 111 defensive rating, and they're plus 3.2 per 100. And that one simple fact, as reductive as it is, creates conversations because it kind of does match the eye test at times. And, again, even over that big sample, opponents are shooting nearly 6% better from three with Clax on the court. I know you can't hand wave. Maybe you don't want to hand wave that all away, but it's certainly pretty noisy and kind of random. But yeah, I just, it's something to watch. I think this has to be the last season of this arrangement. It feels like untenable is maybe a strong word, but it doesn't feel like this can be the situation again, continuously,
No, untenable was the word that popped into my head, especially if Day'Ron maintains what he did last season, even starts to improve a little bit more. At that point, I think it's going to get to a point where they just have to make a decision. And that's not just it shouldn't be that difficult just because of the timeline. Nic he could be a part of the next iteration. Maybe they choose Nic over Day'Ron, but it's a situation where Sean Marks has also shown that he likes to backfill the center position through the draft. He just drafted Danny Wolf. We'll see where he ultimately lands. But it's not like these guys are impossible to find. And Sean Marks has been able to find them, with Jared Allen, with Nic Claxton, with Day'Ron Sharpe now late in the draft. So we'll see. But it's going to be a really interesting year for Day'Ron and for Nic Claxton. We'll be following both of them. But Lucas, appreciate you taking the time as always. And I'm sure we'll have much more Day'Ron talk throughout the year. That does it for this episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys really enjoyed the talk with Lucas, touching on Day'Ron Sharpe and everything having to do with his development and his room for growth. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content in this video, smash that like button. Only takes a second. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Day'Ron Sharpe's improvement. Let me know what you think his potential ceiling is in the NBA long term. But we're rolling on through August and into September. We got Nets training camp coming out. We got a lot more to talk about. So I'll have all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.